There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful at all. It settles into old walls like mold, it thickens the air, it weighs down furniture and clings to everything that used to feel alive. It's the dust that places itself on old family photos, the heavy creaks your footsteps make when you revisit your empty childhood home, and the memories that flood your mind and heart, causing you to realize that time comes for everyone. The mansion in this game is layered in that silence. Something inside still remembers what happened. The walls were sleeping, but when you walk in, they reawaken, and they are listening to you. This is the story of a man who tried to paint his way out of grief, a husband who tried to rewrite sins and tragedies by attempting to capture the past on canvas, a father who thought his legacy could fix everything he broke. And what started as a story about a renowned and brilliant painter ends as something much darker and much, much more pathetic. I've played a lot of horror games, but most of them ask you to be afraid of what's hiding in the dark or of what's chasing you. But this game asks you to live inside of the mind of someone who never left trauma behind. It turns memories into nightmares, guilt into architecture, pain into paint. And the longer you're inside the house, the harder it gets to tell where the man's art ends and his madness begins. Tonight we're going to walk through the story of the base game plus the Inheritance DLC, and then, after you have context, I want to go over the psychological themes the game shares. Hey, you like stories? You like psychology? Then tap that like button to see more. And since you're still here, you're coming with me. Welcome to
Layers of Fear.
This story is told in disjointed pieces. Paintings, letters, echoes, hallucinations, and rooms that shouldn't exist. It isn't straightforward. It loops back on itself, like somebody retelling the same story over and over again, trying to make it end differently. I liked it. However, I did not like the puzzles. I hate puzzles, but if we pick up the pieces and place them in the correct order, we can start to see the full picture. We can understand who the painter was, what he did, and why his family collapsed around him. What is it with painters, by the way? They've always got an issue. However, maybe more importantly, we can understand what fear does to people when they carry it for too long. Notice how I said people. I want you to go into this video knowing that this is more than just the fear the painter, the father, has, because his wife and his daughter are afflicted with that fear as well. But let's start back at the beginning, back when it was just a man in love with a woman who played piano. You see, the house used to be warm and it had music in it, real music. The grand piano sat in the living room, and whenever she played, her husband painted. That was their rhythm, their dance, sound and color, the painter and his muse. She used to be this famous professional musician before she met him. Critics described her work as astounding and enthusiastic, more than just a pretty face. And he was a rising star in the art world, a natural, a generational anomaly, raw, intuitive, and revolutionary. A marriage of arts and of souls. So, they moved into a large Victorian house, must be nice, the kind that's too big for two people to live in unless they're planning to fill it, which they did, with a daughter and a doggo. Everything was perfect, but not for too long. Because as is the case with relationships, when things are good, they're great, but when things get hard, that is where the true test of love comes in. I love my wife, and one thing I recommend to people if they think they want to get married to someone is to travel. Get on a plane, go somewhere far, because when you're exhausted and things go wrong, and they will, you're gonna see how you both handle things. But back to the story. The family's future came apart on the night of the department store fire. During the grand opening, there was a violent fire that trapped and severely injured dozens of people. One of those people just so happened to be the wife. By the way, I never found their names, so I just keep calling them by their titles. But she was caught in the inferno, and she made it out, but only barely, because her hands, her face, her skin was singed off, The nerves in her fingers were damaged. The doctors told her that she'd survive, but her career wouldn't. Her fingers would never dance across 88 keys again. When she came home, she was changed. She no longer had the same beautiful visage she was adorned for. She no longer had the gleaming passion for music anymore. But her husband would still love her, through thick and thin, through sickness and in health, right? Well, he didn't know how to help her. He tried to find surgeons, he paid for skin grafts, but nothing could reverse the irreversible. However, when the doctors told him that the damage was permanent and there was nothing else they could do, he didn't take it well. So he sent letters to all of the doctors, harassing them over and over again. You see, he really wanted his old wife back. And one of the doctors even threatened legal action if he didn't just stop. But you see, the husband would never admit out loud, even to himself, was that he didn't actually care about his wife or her well-being. He wanted his life back, not his wife.
Is that her? Oh, God. Can she hear us? This is all fixable, right? No, you don't understand. Her face, her hands. She will be devastated.
And so what do I mean by this? He only cared about what she could offer him. That she had been a beautiful art piece and an object of desire, and that she was his, that she was of him, but most importantly, that her talent in music was the only thing inspiring and generating his own craft, because without her music, he would not be able to produce art worthy of veneration. The house that once felt creative started to feel cold and quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet that you get when people start avoiding each other. They started leaving notes instead of talking, sometimes just a few words, sometimes entire pages, but rarely face to face. But he began to drink more. She played less, and the child, she suffered too. Many parents probably think that their children are too young to understand everything, but to be honest, they're not too young to feel when something has gone wrong. And the daughter definitely felt things go wrong. Even the family dog would feel the effects of this de-evolution. The husband locked himself in his studio trying to desperately paint a masterpiece, but he couldn't. And as a consequence, he would become a raging alcoholic. He would take it out on his daughter, viciously berating her and inciting terror within her. There's more than one way to abuse a young one. It doesn't solely have to be physical for it to count as abuse. I do think that he physically hurt the dog though, so there's that. However, his wife would quickly become something to just completely ignore. Something he now hated and wished would go away because he wanted his old life back. And she too would grow bitter and hateful towards him. Oh, how she was disgusted by him. How he stopped loving her and showed nothing but abhorrence and indifference to her. He would even cheat on her with another woman.
I had the most beautiful dream last night. I dreamt he came to me, embraced me, loved me, as he once did. But we both know that while I dreamed my silly little dream, it was you he really lusted for.
I finally figured it out, and it's all thanks to you. You've showed me that there's no other way. Even now, your sad smile confirms what should have been obvious. We will not speak again.
The wife would know, and she knew for a long time, but she could do nothing, and nothing would have changed. She just hated him even more, hated herself even more. He was an abusive drunk, a useless husband, and a father who wouldn't even remember his daughter's birthday. Oh, but when he did, he would show up inebriated.
Are you out of your mind?
What? You said there was gonna be a party. I just started a bit early. Whoops.
He couldn't even paint anymore. He couldn't. And he's the type of guy to blame everybody but himself. Without her, he was exposed as a fraud of an artist who couldn't produce anything but mockeries for the world to laugh at. There was no respect for him, and he knew this deep down, and he hated himself even more because of how true it was. He was pathetic. And then things started to get creepy, because it wasn't long before he began hearing rats every night, scratching behind walls, skittering under the floorboards, and yet there were no rats. But he heard them anyway. But even worse, the life of the wife had been taken by a knife. She committed suicide in the bathroom, unable to bear the crushing weight of everything that had happened. Under the layers of her fear, there was a deep-seated guilt and hate that she had for herself, because she blamed herself. Pathetically enough, the husband would still blame her for that too. However, it would continue to spiral from there. Seeing that he was unfit to be a father, a solo parent, eventually a social worker would come, and after a legal battle, his daughter would be taken away to live with another family. But just like he wouldn't take responsibility, he wouldn't just leave this alone. Everything lost, in a desperate attempt to bring his wife, his daughter, and most importantly to him, his art back, he would use the remains of his wife to paint his Magnum Opus, her eyes, bones, hair, things mixed in with his materials so that he could try to finish it. And crazily enough, he didn't see this as desecration. He saw it as restoration. If he used her remains, the painting wouldn't just resemble her, it would be her. A living tribute, a way to make her permanent, immortal, to make himself immortal. So for his Immortal Technique, he gathered 6 items. He made a canvas of stretched skin, a vial of blood for pigment, ground bone for texture, hair to make the brush, a severed finger for detail, an eye to watch the work he finished. Each piece meant something to him. Each one brought him closer to finishing it. This madman painted in layers. Every time that he added something, every time he tried to capture and exhume the past, she would start coming back more and more with each iteration. But I don't mean just on the canvas. I mean around the house. She would appear at the ends of hallways. He would hear her sobs, and sometimes she would even come back to kill him. She was haunting him, and the rooms changed too. Furniture moved on its own, doors led to places that didn't exist. The house shifted with him, like it was being painted and repainted in real time. This was his punishment. It was a labyrinth made of his own doing, from his own denial. But when he finally stood in front of the finished piece, he saw her. Young, perfect, exactly the way that he remembered her with their daughter. For 1 second, he believed he had done it. He brought them back. However, in that moment, he understood he couldn't fix it at all. No matter what he painted, no matter how many times he tried to repaint, he could not undo anything.
I know what must be done.
was once told that insanity runs in my family. It's time to make it stop.
Years passed. The house rotted in silence. Then the daughter came back. But she was grown now, and she was here for her inheritance. The house was decrepit and empty, but her memories filled the gaps, and her animosity towards her father still burned, but she moved through the house the way that you move through a dream, reliving her traumatic past. Sometimes she shrank. The ceilings would get taller, the chairs would get bigger, and the rooms changed shape around her. They became stages where old arguments played out. She was a little girl again, cowering before her father as he screamed. Screamed at mother, at her, at the dog.
I am sick. I'm sick of you not being there for us. We need you. I need you. When was the last time you slept with me? Christ, when was the last time you even touched me? Do you know what that does to me? To know that my own husband is disgusted with me.
Well, excuse me if I've been too busy working my ass off trying to provide for this family. But no, you're right. It's much more important to whisper sweet nothings in your ear.
You call that work? You lock yourself in there for hours, days. You come out looking like shit, stinking of booze and stale piss.
She would continue on and find her old drawings, pages of crayon scribbles, a little artist herself. But she was still never good enough for her father. Unfortunately, when he couldn't find success through his wife anymore, and he knew he didn't have it in him, he would try to find it through his daughter. He would try to push his legacy onto his daughter. He would do things like chastise her for not drawing on canvas the way that he wanted her to. Or if she used crayons, he would yell at her. He shouted that if she couldn't do something right, to not do it at all. Just like when her mother tried to encourage her to play piano, but he thought it was terrible.
If you can't do it right, then don't do it at all.
He would also force her to sit still for hours, days on end, so that he could paint her, and if she moved just a little bit, he would scorn her.
All right, young lady. Shall we Right. Where was I? Ah, yes. The princess was all alone in the dark. And yet... As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw something moving in the...
Keep your head straight!
For she knew that that would be the end of her. Letting the monster pass, there was a stillness in the air. The princess breathed a...
Do you want this story to have a happy ending or not?
Oh, god damn it, not again! Fine! Because the princess wouldn't stop fidgeting, she was set upon by the evil witch's minion and dragged off into the darkness, never to be seen again. The end.
My fault. It was always my fault. All I had to do was stay still, day after day, for hours on end, until he would finally get it right. I've lost count of how many attempts there were, but each one made me feel like I was his greatest failure.
But revisiting her old house and reliving all of these memories, one has to wonder, would she choose to forgive her father? Why should she? If you were a child cursed with familial trauma, would you forgive your parents? If she denies and doesn't forgive him, when she finds the portrait her father left for her,
So, after all this time, after all I've been through,
Stay here. Your mother and I need to talk.
this
is all you have for me? And of all places, you chose this room.
You think I don't hear that? Stop crying! Don't make me come in there!
So many memories. This one room, filled with more memories than I can count.
I thought I told you to be quiet!
Oh, the lovely memories. I imagined him standing there, all smug and pleased with himself, thinking this piece of canvas was somehow going to fix everything. I imagined what I would say to him, what I would do. My daddy, you shouldn't have. You really shouldn't have.
But you see, that wasn't actually the inheritance her father wanted her to find. In the true ending, we find out that what her father gave her, her inheritance, wasn't just a memory. It was insanity. Madness was the gift that had been given to her, and she accepted it.
There was nothing left for me here. No answers. No solace. No closure. My true inheritance lay within. And then, just like that, it finally happened. For the first time in my life, I saw the world through my father's eyes. I was once told that insanity runs in my family. Let it run.
You can look at what happened and call it horror. You can say that the house was cursed, or that he went mad, or that the fire ruined everything, but none of that actually explains what really went wrong, not until you look at the next layer. Because what destroyed this family wasn't one event, it was the man, slowly unraveling while everyone else around him had to live in his wreckage. He collapsed piece by piece, and each time a piece did fall, he painted over it. But this only drove him further insane, and even the doctor he pestered about his wife's skin grafts would state that he could have his assistant get him in touch with several specialists. Even that doctor could tell he needed psychological assistance. I mean, he heard rats every night, scratching, chewing, crawling behind walls. He set traps, poison, he called pest control, he tore up floorboards and plaster, and nobody ever found anything, because nothing was ever there. This was the moment that he should have asked for help, but he didn't. The painter was showing clear signs of psychosis, actual psychosis. He was having visual and auditory hallucinations. He began doubting reality. He started collecting body parts for a painting. This guy couldn't stop. He believed what he was doing mattered more than anything or anyone. To further this discussion, in psychiatry, hallucinations and delusions are two of the clearest symptoms of a psychotic break. His home became a maze. That isn't a metaphor, that is a reflection of the way that psychosis changes spatial perception, memory, and time. People in early stages of schizophrenia often report warped perceptions, things shifting out of place, voices that don't belong, and thoughts that loop. The game visualizes this literally, but it's based on how those conditions really feel. Before I continue, I want to emphasize, I don't think he has schizophrenia. Take my opinion with a grain of salt. I'm just a random guy on YouTube, but I will explain more in a moment. But the painter also presented paranoia. He believed the world was conspiring against him, that people, like his servants, were snooping around his studio. He thought doctors weren't doing anything to fix his wife. Psychosis doesn't always show up all at once. Sometimes it creeps in after loss, stress, or trauma. Not to mention, psychosis can also be triggered by alcohol misuse, and it also has a genetic component to it. Yes, a genetic predisposition may increase the likelihood of an individual being more vulnerable to psychosis. I don't know much about the painter's history beyond what we've talked about and his military service. Actually, yeah, real quick, he has service medals in his drawers, so I know he's ex-military, and he also suffered an injury. I don't know the specifics, but he has a cane that we find on the side of his bed, and we also hear a memory of when he and his wife bought the mansion, alluding to this.
This house is absolutely amazing. Oh, but those stairs. With that leg of mine, I think you'll have to carry me to the bedroom once we move in.
But back to psychosis, the fire, the disfigurement, the failure of his career, those were all compounding triggers. He never went out of his way to get help. He never had time to process it either. Instead, he immediately drank. And I think that we all know that alcohol is never really a solution. It can worsen hallucinations, lower inhibition, increase impulsivity, and scramble memory. When he saw rats or heard whispers, he may have been flip-flopping between alcohol-induced episodes and a genuine psychosis. And so, it's easy to look at everything he went through and immediately think of schizophrenia, right? I think that's what a lot of people probably think of. That's usually the first word people go to when they hear about somebody losing touch with reality, hearing, or seeing things, but schizophrenia isn't and shouldn't be thrown around like a shortcut diagnosis, especially by random people on the internet. It's okay to theorize and have these discussions, but unlicensed individuals can't diagnose anyone, especially fictional characters. Schizophrenia is a specific, medically defined disorder with a very strict criteria. The painter doesn't meet them. According to the DSM-5, schizophrenia requires at least 2 of 5 key symptoms to appear for much of a 1-month period. At least one of those symptoms must involve delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. The other possible symptoms include disorganized or catatonic behavior and negative traits like emotional flatness or loss of motivation. The big thing, in order to qualify as schizophrenia, the overall disturbance must continue for at least 6 months. The painter definitely has hallucinations and delusions, that's not the question. He thinks he hears rats, he sees things that don't exist, he believes in twisted logic where mutilating a corpse will resurrect his family, but the problem is, we have no confirmed timeline. We don't know how long these symptoms lasted. The game never says whether it was a single prolonged breakdown or if it was happening for years. Even if we assume he showed signs for months, we're still missing a clinical baseline. There is no psychiatric evaluation, no record of diagnosis, and no indication of a structured treatment plan. But another thing that I want to differentiate is that schizophrenia is a chronic illness that can include psychosis, but psychosis is just a symptom. And in the painter's case, the best evidence supports that he is experiencing a psychotic break, possibly triggered by grief, stress, alcohol use, or a pre-existing vulnerability. So we can't simply say that he just has that condition, but we can continue to point out the symptoms presented. However, there is another complication: alcohol. Long-term alcohol abuse, especially followed by withdrawal, can lead to something called alcohol-induced psychosis. It mimics the symptoms of schizophrenia almost perfectly. Hallucinations, paranoia, disorganized thinking, aggression, even memory loss. The difference is that it's temporary and directly caused by substance abuse. But, it gets even more complex, and I don't want to dive too much into it, but the painter drank constantly. He refused to stop. That makes it impossible to separate what was caused by a psychiatric illness versus what was worsened or created by addiction. So, no, it's not schizophrenia, not officially. The game also never names it, but let's be real, these games never really do. And the evidence doesn't meet the full diagnostic bar. What we do know is that he experienced severe, untreated psychosis with paranoid, hallucinatory, and delusional features. And he destroyed his family trying to make sense of it all through art. Also, just to touch on this too, he does present depressive symptoms. But I actually want to move the conversation over to talk about his wife, because I think it's important that we give her attention too, because she was a victim of her husband. She was her own person. She achieved much success by herself, and her mental was deteriorated inside of a home where her value was slowly erased. The disfigurement that she suffered from wasn't only a physical thing, because it damaged her role in the family dynamic. Her husband's behavior made her feel like she failed him. That guilt sat under everything, causing her to erode. In relationships where one person becomes the other's creative or emotional anchor, a shift in appearance or ability can trigger a collapse in perceived worth. This aligns with the psychological concept of reflected appraisal, the idea that we form our self-image based on how we believe others see us. When her husband stopped showing her affection or admiration, she started to mirror that rejection inward, even to the point that she would accept him cheating on her. This was, of course, before or at the same time she began to detest him. But there was still that level of learned helplessness. She also experienced a loss of autonomy. Her role as a mother was compromised by her emotional instability. Her role as a musician was buried after the accident. Her role as a wife became strained as he withdrew. You see, when all of your points of identity are stripped away, the mind begins to look for things to blame. The most accessible place to assign that blame is yourself, inward. You believe that you are the problem, and low-key, the world has gaslit you into believing that you are. This pressure likely contributed to symptoms of major depressive disorder, including social withdrawal, diminished interest in previously enjoyed activities, and suicidal ideation. While the game doesn't use clinical language, her actions reflect the pattern: avoidance, isolation, and hopelessness. The fact that her suicide happens in a bathtub, quiet, solitary, and fucking unseen, underscores how invisible she had already become by that point. Again, I really want to hit on the fact that her husband ignored her existence. The knife was basically in his hands. Even after her death, her psychological presence remains as this haunting emotional residue. Her voice, her music, her silence exists in a home that echoes trauma, and her husband experiences this. So, by around a little past the middle of my playthrough, I had this aha moment where I knew that this wasn't a paranormal disturbance, or at least I didn't think that it was. For me, this was the emotional architecture of a woman who died believing that she was the reason that everything fell apart. But the daughter probably received the brunt force of everything, especially because she was just a child when this happened. If you've seen some of my videos talking about the psychology of children, whether it's Among the Sleep, Evil Holiday, or Out of Sight, then you may know that when kids experience anything, the effect and magnitude that they receive is often multiplied. And the way she's remembered tells you everything. In the base game, she's seen only through drawings, memories, and broken toys, but Inheritance puts you in her shoes. It confirms what the original story implied. She was raised in a house where emotional needs were secondary to creative obsession. From a psychological standpoint, this creates the conditions for developmental trauma, a term used to describe prolonged emotional neglect or instability during the early stages of life. And again, this isn't strictly physical. It could be emotional, it could be mental. Over time, this warps identity formation, trust, and emotional regulation within your children. And she was surrounded by unreliability. Unfortunately, her mother, once nurturing, became distant after the accident. She became so depressed that she couldn't even give any more of herself. She had no capacity. She was incapable of it. even if she wanted to. And she wanted to. She recognized that she had a beautiful daughter, but she couldn't give it because she was so broken. And her father, when not drunk or lost in his fucked delusions, was volatile and unavailable too. The combination, absence from one parent, emotional instability from the other, can create what is called a disorganized detachment style. Children raised in this environment may crave closeness but feel unsafe when they receive it. The emotional signals are mixed, and the child learns that love and fear come from the same place. I will say that again. The child learns that love and fear come from the same place. And for the daughter, it was her parents. It was this mansion. There is also evidence of internalized shame. The daughter references feeling like a burden or disappointing her parents, more so her father. For children, because they can't understand everything, they often don't just feel badly when things go wrong in their family. Many take on that blame themselves, and then they believe that they are inherently flawed because of the emotional debris their family left. In the game, I wouldn't be surprised if she blames herself for her mother's death, her father's failures, and for her being taken away from her family. But then we see that insanity really does run in her family, because returning to her house triggers the madness in her, the psychological illness that's in her DNA. But first I want to point something out. I said that schizophrenia needs to show symptoms for at least 6 months, and in the Inheritance DLC we see memories of multiple birthdays as the daughter grows up. So at first glance, it might seem like this proves the father's hallucinations and breakdowns lasting across several years, but that's not what we're actually seeing. At least I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But the inheritance memories are hers. We're not inside of his mind anymore, we're inside of the daughter's. And those are childhood memories being reconstructed through an extremely emotional lens. None of them confirm what he was experiencing, only how she remembers it. And memory, especially traumatic memory, is not clinical record. It's filtered through emotion, perception, and age. And that's important, because for a schizophrenia diagnosis, the symptoms have to be objectively observed or documented in the person being diagnosed. We need to see that he was hallucinating or delusional over a long continuous span. But the only time we directly experience his hallucinations is in the main game. And that all seems to take place in one fractured episode, likely near the end of his life. What Inheritance does confirm is that the daughter was impacted for years. Her long-term trauma reflects emotional neglect and instability. So what makes it even more complicated, and might actually further substantiate my point, is that she may also be mentally unwell. Because the true ending of Inheritance shows the daughter continuing the cycle. She inherited his pathology. The way her memories distort reality, the way she talks to herself, and her complete immersion into the emotional wreckage all suggest that she's not a stable narrator. The game does heavily imply that the same breakdown that consumed her father is now unfolding in her, which means we can't fully trust what we see through her perspective either. Again, just to recap and emphasize, I don't think it's schizophrenia, and we can't confirm it. The biggest things are duration of symptoms is not confirmed, and there are other possible alternative diagnoses that fit better. But this all exposes how deeply the damage ran, and how generational trauma scars, but also replicates. However, you might be wondering if I'm going to address the book in the room. The novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which appears physically in multiple places throughout the game. There's even specific paintings that also visually resemble the portrait of Dorian from some adaptations of Wilde's story. This is a nod to the game's interest in the relationships between art and psychological decay. In the novel, Dorian remains physically unchanged while a portrait of him becomes increasingly disfigured as a result of his moral corruption. In the game, the painter experiences a breakdown that accelerates with each failed attempt to create the perfect image of his wife, his attempt to immortalize the mortal and keep things perfect and beautiful. The comparison works on a thematic level, but it also opens up a psychological interpretation about repression and distortion. The concept of projection, as defined by Freud in 1894, explains this. Projection occurs when a person externalizes their unwanted thoughts or emotions onto someone or something else. In the novel, the portrait absorbs Dorian's conscience. In the game, the canvas becomes a container for the painter's guilt and denial. His repeated failures are psychological. Each one reflects something that he's not willing to admit to himself, that he destroyed the very thing he once claimed to love. But the physical presence of Wilde's book in the house connects these ideas more directly. It suggests that the painter has read it or identified with it. The choice to include it in the game shows that Blueber intended to draw a clear line between Wilde's story and the painter's own collapse. However, speaking about painters, this game on screen has ruined gaming for me. It set the bar so high that I find it difficult to enjoy other games now, and it also has painters dealing with trauma, so click that and let me know your thoughts.
If you're gonna give someone flowers, you should probably do it before they wither and die.
What, the flower? Or Sophie?
Ooh, dark. Sophie would approve.